Plans to grow Australia to 30 million people. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, I'm Florian Heise and welcome to another episode of Heise Says. I've my stein of coffee and I thought we would have a look at this article which I just discovered from the Daily Mail, which was out a few days ago, about the objective to grow Australia to 30 million people by 2030. 30 million by 2030. Now, this feels very much like a continuation of the rapid immigration growth we've had here in Australia since 2000, where none of our infrastructure has kept up, and it has had a lot of flow-on effects to the rest of the economy and our quality of life. I think this is something that people need to discuss sensibly and reasonably. And if you think this type of content is interesting and you want to discuss it with your neighbors and your friends and family, please share it on social media. Get the word out, because we need to talk about these things sensibly. It needs to be discussed at a day-to-day level, so we can really be critical of what our politicians are telling us and what the media is telling us. Now, before we get into this article, I want to bring up two videos that I've done before, and I'm just going to jump over to my right screen here. The first one is a video I did in July, New South Wales freshwater scarcity. It's detailing all the dams in New South Wales that are at risk of running out of water due to the drought, but also due to the infrastructure or demands placed on the infrastructure by the population. The second video I want to highlight is one I did as well in July, the day after this video, and this is looking at all of the additional potable water infrastructure we created since 2000 for dams, focusing on dams. Now, a population increased by 25% in that period. What percentage do you think our dams increased by that period? Let me know in the comments what you think. I won't tell you because I want you to go and watch the video, but it's concerning. We're becoming more and more reliant on desalination technology. Okay, so this is showing you where our population has increased significantly and we haven't kept up with it at all. And now it feels like the plan is to continue with the Ponzi scheme. 30 million by 2030. Mass immigration will see Australia's population grow by 160,000 a year, putting more pressure on home affordability and public services. Well, another thing to consider with regards to home affordability. Here we go. This is showing you the amount of foreign investment that came in between 2015 and 2016, how high it was. Now, one thing to understand when we're talking about home affordability is that when someone immigrates over here and they bring money in and they get a job and they borrow some money and they buy a home, it's all fine, all sounds good. But the issue is that money that is borrowed from the bank is essentially created out of nowhere. So it's more money that comes out of nowhere that goes into the economy. So it adds to the inflation. So there's an inflationary effect of this rapid population growth because we're dealing with fiat money. And it's a bit hard to wrap your head around because, you've got to realize inflation, it is a steady erosion of your purchasing power. $10 that you got paid in 1990 is not going to have the same purchasing power now, 28 years later. Oh no, sorry. Yes, 28 years later, 1990, 2000, yes. I'm getting old, as it would have had then. Because that is your loss in purchasing power. So the greater the increase of money in the system, the less it's worth to all of us. And one thing to remember, I did another video where the ABS and the RBA does not count the purchase of existing homes or land in their inflation calculations as CPI, because CPI isn't actually a cost of living increase, even though that's what we think it is. They're telling us it's not. So let's have a look. The population plan, 160,000 immigrants will arrive each year for the next 4 years. Australia to expand from 25 million to nearly 30 million people in 10 years. The migration rate has outnumbered the natural birth rate since 2010. Plans find capital cities stretched beyond their means by population growth. Modifications to infrastructure to cope with the boom will cost billions. At least 4.5 billion will be spent on roads to ease chronic urban congestion. Government will try to deflect new migrants, foreign students, to regional areas. Do you think that will work? The thing is, this is a reduction in your quality of life. If you're driving to work takes you longer, it's going to be less time with your family, less time to relax, more time just sitting in the car. This is a reduction in quality of life. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, a gentleman at church, who's actually sent his family back to India, and he's thinking of moving back there himself because the quality of life that he has back home is better than here in Australia. You know, it can sound good getting paid so much money here in Australia, but everything costs so much more as well. And our government is pouring more and more money into road infrastructure to address these issues. So, you know, our roads, here's a question for you. Are roads a long-term benefit to the, to the productive capacity of the civilization, or is it just about getting stuff around, particularly when a lot of it's imported? More than 160,000 migrants are expected to arrive in Australia each year over the next 4 years, putting unprecedented pressure on the nation's infrastructure. A new report reveals government plans to spend billions of dollars on improving roads and transport to cope with exploding population numbers. Sydney, Melbourne, and southeast Queensland have absorbed 75% of the nation's population growth in the last 10 years. The boom has taken its toll on public transport and roads, which are now overcrowded and congested, and the cost of housing has soared. The freeways have slowed, trains are sometimes at crush capacity, and housing construction has not always kept pace, says the report called Planning for Australia's Future Population. I mean, this is an image out of Hong Kong. This is when I was in Hong Kong, how crazy it was there. But the difference was they had trains every 3 minutes. Avoidable congestion is already estimated to cost 25 billion and is forecast to reach 40 billion by 2030 without further change. To cope with the growth, the government has vowed to spend billions of dollars trying to relieve the congestion in the pressured capital cities, pledging a $4 billion urban congestion fund to relieve pressure on the roads. How much tax revenue would you have to generate? I mean, this just shows you that the last 20 years, planning has been terrible, utterly terrible. The government also plans to spend $4.5 billion on regional roads connecting ports, airports, and freight routes in an effort to boost regional employment, and another $9.3 billion in an inland rail corridor stretching from Melbourne to Brisbane, and $2 billion for a fast rail connection from Melbourne to Geelong. Okay, is all this money, all this government spending, is it going to offset the declining quality of life that people are experiencing? Is it going to address that? Since 2010, migration rates have outstripped birth rates, with about 59% of Australia's total population growth coming from migration, the report says. Of the migration to Australia, the vast majority have moved to urban areas. Well, of course they have. Who hasn't moved to urban areas? I think when my father migrated over, I think he actually moved right on the outskirts of Melbourne, because it was cheap, eventually. In the past 20 years, migrants have made up nearly 2/3 of Sydney's population increase and half of all population growth in Melbourne and Perth. More than 1.4 million international student visas granted since June 2015, according to the Home Affairs Department's figures. Population growth needs to be sustainable, the report says. So, it needs to occur at a rate where infrastructure and services can be put in place to match the growing population, and this has not been done. If this does not occur, the result is increased congestion, housing pressures, pollution, and lack of support and amenity. This has adverse consequences for quality of life. Well, yes, our quality of life has gone down, but also this is more competition for the same number of jobs. It's a decrease in wages. Wages have gone down in Australia. I mean, guys, these are things that need to be taken into consideration. They need to be taken into consideration. Australia's total population is forecast to expand from 25 million to 29.5 million by 2029, the report says. See, personally, I've got no problem with increasing the population of Australia. I think it needs to happen. I think for Australia to be an innovative nation, we need to have a certain scale to just have markets for products and services. But it needs to be done at a sensible rate, and it needs to be done strategically. This seems like catch-up. This seems like catch-up where they're trying to address, all these issues. I remember reading another article where immigrants were going down to Tasmania or Launceston, couldn't find work, were stuck doing Uber. So then they left and got jobs in the city, even though they had all these benefits down there. There needs to be incentives in these regional centres to create employment, to get businesses there. And I think that's by reducing red tape in these areas, by the government stepping away. Why don't we look at zonal taxation? That's an innovative idea. Both Sydney and Melbourne are expected to add just over 1 million people each, increasing to 6.4 million and 6.3 million respectively over the next decade. The Morrison government said on Monday that the permanent migration intake had been lowered from 190,000 per year, and it would try to deflect new migrants to regional areas in order to relieve the pressure on Sydney and Melbourne. Population Minister Alan Tudge said the 160,000 year cap would include 23,000 skills visa requiring people to work outside the big cities for 3 years before being eligible for permanent residency. 7 designated area migration agreements have been made to allow regional employers to sponsor skilled workers. Changes have been made to the temporary graduate visa for international students who have completed their studies at a regional campus or university, so they continue to live and work in regional Australia, the report said. Okay, that's great. How about rather than bringing more people in from overseas bringing more people in at such an increased rate, how about instead of doing that, we look at creating ways to encourage people to move regionally? We already have too much pressure on the infrastructure in the cities. How about we look at ways to make it more enticing for people to move to the regions? I know, let's say we've got a nationalized national broadband network, don't we? That for some reason the government is running at a stupid loss. How about you use that? Free internet to anyone who moves to the region. Free NBN. There you go. How many businesses would that incentivize, or how many individuals would it? Maybe also a reduction in tax for 10 years for new businesses that go there and employ locally. There's an idea. How far could that go to stimulate actual job creation than just building more roads everywhere? And the hippies, they hate all the pollution. I mean, look at this. None of these cars are running efficiently sitting there. Mr. Tudge said the plan would also create incentives to encourage international students to go to regional areas and small cities to study. Economist Leith Van Olsen, who works for Treasury, Goldman Sachs, and now writes for website Macro Business, was scathing about both the Coalition and Labor's plans to cope with mass migration through infrastructure spending or diversion to regional areas. The only solution to maintaining Australia's livability is to slash immigration back to historic levels, well below 100,000 people a year, to allow housing and infrastructure to keep pace, he wrote on Monday. Anything else is treating symptoms, not the cause, and are merely policy smokescreens. Yeah, I agree with him there. That's what it feels like, isn't it? It really does seem like that's what they're doing. Daily Mail Australia asked Mr. Tudge's Office for Economic Modelling to show the cost-benefit analysis of mass migration set at 160,000 per year. What do you think? They didn't get it. So we will see. What do you think, guys? Do you think this is a solution, or is it just a smokescreen to the problems? Do you think it will continue to exacerbate the issues that Australia has with its infrastructure, reduction in wages, and reduction in quality of life? How can we find a way? How can we find a smart solution to, grow Australia into a larger nation, but also provide benefits to all our quality of life? I think we need to slow it down, and I think we need to look at ways to get people to decant out of the cities, to go to the regions, to provide better incentives for businesses to establish slightly further out. Let me know what you think. Like, share, and subscribe. Please share this content with your friends and family. Discuss with them over dinner what they reckon. And thank you to everyone who's helped supporting me. If you're enjoying what I'm doing, I have a Patreon and a Subscribe Star. Really appreciate your support there, and PayPal, and those of you that put up with my ads and use my Amazon links. Thank you all very much. Take care, guys, and I will talk to you later. Bye for now.